All right. So in this particular video, we're going to take a closer look at the median nurses' salaries for all of the states in the United States. And so what we're going to do is we want to take a look, because we can take a look at these values and we can go, okay, well, what's the greatest one? And it seems like we go through and evaluate and look. Let's see. California is 87,150, and that seems to be like the highest, the greatest value, and the lowest seems to be here. I have 53,500. It's 53,750. So it seems, as I'm scanning through these, that California has the highest of 87,150, and Iowa has 53,500. And if I'm just kind of generally looking at these, it seems, and my eye is catching this 10,000s place, right? How many 10,000s? So this is 60, 70, 66, 59, 67, 67. So I'm looking at those particular values and I'm going, well, if I had to give kind of an estimate of a typical value for all of the United States, then I would go through and probably say it's somewhere around, I don't know, 65, maybe higher 60,000, somewhere in there. But what we want is, in order to gain a little more information about these particular values, and really we talk about how they're distributed, right? How many, let's say, are in each 10,000, right? So we can go through and do that so we can get a better understanding of the different number of states and their particular salaries that they're offering. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at creating what we call a histogram. And we're only looking at the salaries for each state. That's all. So we're going to limit ourselves to just the salaries. So this type of graph, a histogram, is used for quantitative information about a person, place, or thing, right? And in this particular graph, the person, place, or thing are going to be for each of the 50 states in the United States. And we have quantitative information, which again is a number and accepted unit. And so for this one, it's going to be dollars. And in this particular case, it's a specialized bar graph for quantitative information. Now, we saw bar graphs in the graph reading activity because those were bars, right, that we're going through and taking a look at. And in a bar graph, the size of the bar is going to be proportional. So if we take a look at this bar over here for the high school diploma, the length of this bar is about half the length of this bar for 1,401. So the lengths are proportional to how big the value is. So, and these are bars for each of these particular categories. So with that, if we go through and take a look at just the salaries, okay, now what's included here is going to be the states also, but in the very end, we're really only concerned with, and guaranteed we're really only concerned with, just the values in the very end, the nursing salary, okay? And then what I've gone through and done here is I've grouped them according to, if you will, salary, what we call salary ranges. So the salary range, let's start over here. The salary range over here is going to be from, didn't like that, there we go. The salary range here is going to be from 50,000 to 55,000. And the salary range for here is going to be from 55,000. And let's just call it 55K. And 55K, as some of you may know, is going to be 55,000. The K represents thousands. So we have 55K to 60K. And here we have 60K to 65K. And here we have 65K to 70K. And for this one right here that we have boxed together here, we can go through and have 70K to 75K. And here we have 75K to 80, and here we have 80K to 85K, and here we have 85K to 90K. So with this, we can see that we have only one state that's going to have this high salary, yet we have quite a few states that are kind of in this middle area, or these middle ranges for salaries, right? So we like to go through and get a graphical representation of how many fall into each of these intervals. So we can go through and take this and put it in what we call a table format. And this particular table format is going to be what we call a frequency table. So this frequency table is just that, okay? So I went through and carried some more intervals beyond the values that we had. So I start out at 40,000 down here at the bottom, and then I go to 45,000. And then I go from 45,000 to 50,000, and I go from 50,000 to 55,000, and from 55,000 to 60,000. Now, you might be noticing what's going on this grouping symbol here. One has a square bracket and the other one has just a parenthesis. Well, what that means is if I exactly had a salary that was, say, 85,000, I would need to decide which particular interval, if you will, of these values I would put it in. Would I count it here or would I count it here? So the square bracket here says that I'm going to count it in this one, not this one. So this says, the parenthesis says 85,000 is not included in here. I won't count it here. But if I had one that was exactly 85,000, I would count it right here in this one. Okay, so that's the difference between the square bracket and the parenthesis. Square bracket says this value that it's closest to, I'm going to count in this interval. The parenthesis says I'm not going to count this specific value, this end value, in this interval. I'm going to count it in the next one up. So if we go through and we were to go through and count the number in each of these salary intervals, the number of states that ended up with median salaries in these salaries intervals, if we take a look at this from 70K to 75K, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've gone through and I have the number of states, and the number of states is really just what we call the frequency. how many times did a value from this list fall in this interval? Okay, it was at least 70,000 and less than 75,000, and we had 6. Okay, and if we do that for all of them, then for all of these intervals, and we counted, because we kept track for every state, and we counted how many states, let's say how many states are in this 50K to 55K. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. And in this frequency table, we have, lo and behold, 4 for that salary interval. So with this is what we call a frequency table. And so now we want to take this frequency table and we want to create a graph out of it. So how we go through and create a graph out of it is on the horizontal axis. That's what this is, because it's a horizontal. We have vertical going up, we have number of states. And these increments from 0 to 2, because there's 2 divisions, and from 2 to 4 have to be the same distance when we go through and look at it. Okay. Now 9 is between 8 and in the middle between 8 and 10, and 5 is in between, right in the middle between 4 and 6. And so, but what we've done is we have our salary intervals. Now, if you notice, the salary intervals are the same width, if you will, and the width is 5,000 for each one. Okay, all the way through. And if you notice, the distance from the lower part of the interval to the upper part, right in here, from here to here, that distance graphically is the same as from here to here. So if we take a look at these bars, if you will, these rectangles, they're all the same width. And that's what we want for these salary intervals. We want them all the same width. So it's going to be easy for us to go through and compare. And then the height of the bar indicates the number of states that have salaries in that interval. So from 50 to 55,000, there are 4. And if we come over here from 65,000 to 70,000, that's right in here, it's going to be 12. And from 75,000 to 80,000 right here, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go across, and that's going to be 3. There's an unsaid 3 here, and it's right in the middle. Okay. So this is how you go through and read a histogram. So one of the things we need to point out is this is a histogram, and if you notice, the only information that we're looking at is we're looking at the salaries, and we're looking at how many of the states had salaries within that interval. So what I want to point out is what is not a histogram. Okay, this is not a histogram. And the reason why it's not a histogram is a histogram only goes through and takes into account the quantitative variable and how many of these cases, if you will, or states have salaries in a particular interval. This just goes through and gives a bar for what the salary was in that particular state. So there's no ordering in terms of, you can take a look and see what the highest and what the smallest is. But as you can see from here, we can tell that a lot of the states had salaries. A majority of the states, well, really not a majority quite yet. There was 24 because we have 12 and 12. But most of the states here, if we included the 55 to 60, had salaries in between 55,000 and 70,000. And remember what I said back in terms of, well, it seems like if I had to pick a typical value, this would seem like these values were showing up the most. So we could talk about typical values, and then later on we'll talk about averages and things like that. But this is not a histogram, okay? In the next video, there's a video that will go through and show you how to go through and create, it's going to take this information and it's going to show you how to create this histogram from all of this information that you have here.